A prenuptial agreement, or in Alabama, an antenuptial agreement, is a contractual agreement entered into between two partners that are getting married. You can also enter into a postnuptial agreement, which is essentially the same agreement but entered into after the marriage. The agreement has to be signed by both parties, and in Alabama, both parties actually have to be represented by counsel. So when we at Foxtrot work with our clients on their antenuptial agreement or prenup agreement, we're working closely with opposing counsel, most often not in a contested way, but in a way to make sure that the contractual agreement, the prenuptial agreement, is fair and enforceable, and that both parties understand exactly what they're getting into, so that that agreement is going to be stronger and more enforceable in the future. These agreements protect people's assets, they protect folks' businesses, and importantly, they can protect inheritance or estate planning mechanisms in place for if there are pre-existing children in a marriage. So a prenuptial agreement is going to address all of those factors so that those don't become a more complex issue if the marriage comes to an end. Prenups offer multiple specific benefits. I've gone over it generally, but if you're a little bit maybe more established in your life and your career, you're going to have built up assets. You're going to maybe have pre-existing children or family relationships, commitments that you've made to those children, that if your new marriage ends, you don't want that legal process to interfere with what you've sought to establish for those children, what you've sought to build in that business. A prenuptial agreement, if it's drawn up carefully and the right way, it can even address assets that accrue through the marriage if those assets are specifically identifiable. Prenuptial agreements can address allocation of debt if we're specific about how those debts are incurred. Prenuptial agreements don't address everything. There are certain assets, certain income that is just going to be considered new marital property. But if those assets are significant, they can, like I've said before, be addressed through a postnuptial agreement. So there are various ways to identify your assets, protect your assets, and one ultimate benefit of a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement is that if the marriage does end, it's going to streamline the legal process and minimize the out-of-pocket cost of complex litigation, especially if there are significant assets involved. So it's a little bit of an insurance policy, but there are multiple benefits of prenuptial and postnuptial agreements in Alabama. Prenups are the vast majority of the time enforceable. If there are significant assets at play, you're still probably going to see a challenge to the prenuptial agreement. But when that occurs during divorce litigation, it almost breaks up the litigation into two separate stages. The first stage is the prenup enforceable? To what extent? And then if not, we proceed to litigation. If it is, that process is simplified because we're just enforcing the terms of the agreement. So yes, as long as the law is complied with, both parties understood what they were agreeing to, both parties had the advice and consideration of counsel during the drafting, during the signing, execution of the prenuptial or postnuptial agreement, they're typically going to be enforceable. I mean, that's the whole point. And judges, frankly, judges want these cases that they encounter to be as simple as possible. So they have, in order to run their dockets efficiently, have a vested interest and incentive in enforcing fair, well-drafted, well-executed prenup and postnuptial agreements. So as long as you're working with professionals to design, draft, and execute your prenuptial or postnuptial agreement, they're typically going to be enforceable in Alabama law. You can challenge a prenuptial agreement in Alabama. Those grounds are limited, and it is a bit of a long shot depending on what was addressed during the prenuptial agreement. Some of the typical grounds for challenging a prenuptial agreement is that it was not executed properly. Another ground might be that one party or the other did not disclose or withheld information regarding the breadth or size of their assets. So if there was some sort of fraud in the process, a prenup or postnup can be set aside. This is an important one. And this goes back to some of the other things we've discussed about drawing up not an even agreement, but a fair agreement. If a court were to find that the prenuptial agreement is so one-sided, so unfair, that it is, the term we use is unconscionable, a court can set aside the agreement. So if you believe that information was withheld during the preparation of your prenuptial agreement, if you feel like there was fraud, or if you feel like you've just gotten taken for a ride, then it's worth considering exploring a potential challenge to your prenuptial agreement. And if that challenge has enough teeth, maybe you and your lawyer are able to work something out that might be a little different from the prenuptial agreement, but might still be worth considering for both sides in order to avoid long, drawn-out, complex divorce litigation. One last thing that we always like to discuss with our clients about prenuptial or postnuptial agreements is that we want to create space for love, for the relationship. We don't want people staying in marriages because they feel trapped. We don't want people staying in relationships because they feel obligated or for some sort of strategic or financial incentive. That's not what marriage is, guys. I mean, we don't do this because we don't like marriage. We don't divorce people. We want the institution of marriage to be as sacred as it is. The less we can make it about money, the less we can inject fear or uncertainty, the more we can curate a legal environment where, hey, I love you, you love me, let's make it official, let's build a life together so we can focus on our love for one another. So when we talk about prenuptial agreements and postnuptial agreements, it's not some, well, why should I sign that if you don't believe in our relationship? It's because I want to believe in our relationship. I want to give our relationship the best chance to succeed. I want our relationship to be about us, not about what either one of us might get or might lose if it doesn't work out. So we want to create an opportunity for folks to be together because that's where they want to be and who they want to be with. So if there are any questions about prenuptial or postnuptial agreements, if you have any concerns as you're entering into or considering starting a new chapter in your life with someone new, contact us at Foxtrot Family Law. We'll walk you through the process, we'll walk you through all the considerations, and ask the questions to get you thinking about what's important to you and how a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement might protect what you've built for yourself in your life as you start a new chapter with a new partner.